Hello everyone, welcome to our online science festival, Curious About Our Planet. My name is Patrick from Glasgow Science Centre, and our guest for this session is Kate, a countryside ranger at Whitelee Windfarm. We'll have plenty of time for our questions later on, so please feel free to leave any questions you have in the comments box on YouTube, and we'll get through as many of them as we possibly can. I'll be speaking to you later on, but for now it is over to you, Kate.
Hi everyone. Hi, as Patrick said, my name is Kate and I am a countryside ranger and I work at Whitelee Windfarm. There we go. I've been working at Whitelee Windfarm for nearly 8 years now, and I've been a ranger for about 10 years now. So hopefully I know my stuff, but hey ho, let's go and get on for our next slide. So what is a countryside ranger? Countryside ranger does quite a lot of different things. Most people think that we just look after wildlife and the environment, and that's about it. But our job actually entails quite a lot of different bits and pieces. So I've put together on this screen a wee thing called the ranger tree, and it gives you a broad sense of what we actually do. Most of our job here at Whitelee is actually very people focused. So countryside rangers, we basically connect people and people with places and nature. That's sort of a broad sense of what we do. So that can be here at Whitelee, our main aim is to promote responsible outdoor access, and I'll get onto that a wee bit later. So we do bits and pieces like that. When we're dealing with people, that could be all sorts of things. So we can run educational sessions, a bit like what I'm doing today with you guys over the video call, but instead, normally I'm outside. Normally I'm outside and doing all sorts of things. So up in the top corner there, you've got a school group working with windsocks. So we do a variety of different education sessions so we can teach people about sustainability or renewables, also things about nature. That is our bread and butter at the end of the day. That's what we do. We're into nature and trying to promote nature and the outdoors to people. So that could be anything from nursery age all the way up to university age, dealing with adult groups as well, all sorts of different interest groups going along. We also put on an events program throughout the year, so that can be anything from arts and crafts to nature walks. We can also do things like carving things out of wood, and we can also do things like we celebrate Halloween, we do hikes, and we also do bits and pieces like orienteering as well, and Christmas crafts and stuff. So a very wide range of activities and events that we do. We also work with people in our local communities as well. We have a wee regular group of volunteers that come up and do various tasks. So there's a photo there of them building our bug hotel outside the visitor centre. And we also do things like wildlife recording, and we're based out of a wee ranger cabin in the car park at the visitor centre. So there's always time for people coming up and asking us questions and things like that as well. On the flip side of things, you've got that picture of me in a funny hat at the top, and we do practical jobs. So anything from trimming grass, clearing paths, emptying bins on a weekly basis. That's a glorious part of a less glamorous part of our job, but it needs to be done. And generally just making sure that people are having an enjoyable and safe time when they're visiting the countryside. Next slide, please. So Scotland's Countryside Rangers, I'll just touch a wee bit on this. So you can see there on the map, that's our current sort of spread of countryside rangers throughout Scotland. Every single one of those dots represents a ranger service of sorts. And we are scattered throughout Scotland. There's over 400 countryside rangers in Scotland altogether. And there's a lovely picture of us all, not all of us, but a good amount of us at a conference last year in the outdoors up at Aviemore. So we always get together. We're a great network. We like to share ideas and work together to come up with solutions to different things. Main parts of our jobs are to do with promoting outside and also dealing with like visitors and visitor management as well. So all sorts of ideas being shared as we go along with those things. Next, please. Okay, so I touched on this earlier. Promoting responsible access in the outdoors. What does that mean? So here in Scotland, we are very, very lucky. We have a thing called the Scottish Outdoor Access Code, and that means that we have the right to enjoy the outdoors and countryside on most land and inland water in Scotland. There's a few different things that you can't do. You can't go on Ministry of Defence land. It would be silly to go on railway lines, for example. You're not allowed on those either. And some reservoirs are quite dangerous as well, so best not to go near them as well. So the Scottish Outdoor Access Code gives you those rights, but with those rights also comes your responsibility to be out there. And the three key principles of that are taking responsibility for your own actions, respecting the interests of others, so respecting other people who are also trying to enjoy themselves in the outdoors, and also caring for the environment as you go along. Here at Whiteley, we have walkers, dog walkers, runners, cyclists, mountain bikers, horse riders. We even get cross-country skiers in the winter. So all sorts of people coming together in this place. And it's also a working site as well. It's a wind farm. So we've got wind farm engineers. It's also very busy with forestry works as well. We've got farmers who farm the land as well with their sheep. And we've also got drinking water reservoirs. So we've got a really big mix of different kinds of people and different work practices all coming together all in one. So it's just keeping an eye and making sure that the balance is always right. Next slide, please. So on to interesting stuff. Whiteley Habitat. So our main habitat up here at Whiteley Windfarm is a peat bog. And peat bog is very much, it looks quite a sort of barren landscape, but there's actually a lot of wildlife and different kinds of wildlife compared to what you might see at your local park and things like that. So you can see from there, we've got nice boggy pools and different things like that. So next slide. An introduction to our wildlife here at Whiteley. So I'll just give you a very broad overview of what we have. So starting up in the top left, so we have over 356 plant species that have been recorded here. That photo there is one of my absolute favourites. It's called the round-leaved sundew. And it's actually a carnivorous plant, so it eats meat. Don't worry, it's not going to grab your leg. It's actually really, really small, really small. It's about the size of my thumb at its biggest, and what it eats is flies and midges. So that's how it gets its nutrients on the peat bog, because it's quite a harsh environment to live in. We also have 52 species of fungi, so things like toadstools and mushrooms. And you can see lots of different ones throughout the year. That one there is called a shaggy ink cap, and they used to use that. You sort of mush it down and you can get ink from it, and you could write it with a quill. We have 94 species of lichen, which I don't actually have a photo of on this slide. We have over 100 bird species. That one there is a curlew, so that is a wading bird, and it's got a nice long beak to prod into the ground to get at the insects and things to get its dinner. We also have 17 species of mammals, so things from badgers and foxes to roe deer and brown hares, which is one that's down in the bottom right hand corner there. We also have over 150 species of invertebrates, so that's things like insects. So I've got a nice picture there of a dragonfly, sorry, up in the top corner there. And last but not least, everyone's favourite topic when they come up here and ask us about the wildlife, we have 5 species of amphibian and reptile. So that's things like toads and frogs and newts, but we also have common lizards, and everyone's favourite that they love to ask about all the time is our adder, which is our only venomous snake in the UK. Not to worry though, you're very unlikely to see one. I've only ever seen 3 in my time here at Whiteley, and that's what, nearly 8 years now, so very, very unlikely to see one. If you are, you're very lucky to see it, but you give it a wide berth and walk in the opposite direction, because you don't want a wee nasty bite off of one of those, because that's a wee hospital job for you. Okay, next slide. So part of the sort of main topic of the Curious About stuff is to do with air pollution, and I thought I'd touch on a wee bit about that, linking in with our habitat here at Whiteley, which is the peat bog. So I've got a wee diagram that I drew myself last week for this slide. So peat is basically a type of soil. It's and you're all going to roll your eyes that people think, oh, soil's really boring, but actually this is quite an interesting one. So peat is made up of about 80% water, roughly, and then the rest of it is made up of decomposing organic matter, so that's things like dead plants and things that sort of build up over time. So in the picture there, the brown stuff is the peat. On the top, we've got all the different lovely plants that we have, so we've got all the different grasses, we've got lots and lots of different mosses and things, and we've got heather and stuff, nice and colourful. And then what happens there is that the plant use photosynthesis to draw carbon dioxide out of the air, and they lock that away as carbon inside the plant body, and then when it eventually dies off at the end of the year, that adds into the peat bogs, which stores carbon in the peat bog. You can see my little black C's in the peat bog, that's carbon. And that stores it away. Now, peat bogs are really, really important in storing carbon and reducing climate change. And what happens is, if a peat bog is actively forming and really, really healthy, then it will store carbon. It's what we call a carbon sink. However, if we end up destroying our peat bogs, what happens is that carbon is then released into the atmosphere and contributes to our climate change. It joins up and becomes carbon dioxide again, which we don't want. So where was I? Peat bogs, yeah. So peat bogs are very, very important in storing carbon. They're called carbon sinks. If we destroy them or let them degrade, then they're going to release carbon back into the atmosphere and contribute to climate change. So it's very important that we preserve these habitats and we actively try to restore them. And a very good fact that I heard last year from a peat bog specialist was that actually 6% of the total amount of carbon emissions that Scotland releases come from peat bogs that over the years. So very important that we tidy all that up and bring them back to what they should be. And lots of different projects throughout Scotland sort of working on that to do that. Another fact for you is that there's more in Scotland's peat bogs than has been released since the Industrial Revolution in Scotland. So there you go, 5 figures for the importance of restoring and protecting our peat bogs. Okie dokie. I think the last slide is just about our links.
Kate, thank you so much for sharing that presentation with us. I've learned so much about the Countryside Service and what goes on up at Whiteley, and I'm sure everyone else has as well. And once more, thank you everyone for bearing with the technical difficulties we experienced there. And we'll try our best to answer some questions just now. And the first question, Kate, is have you always been interested in nature and conservation? And could you tell us about how you came to be a countryside ranger? So how did you end up working where you are now? Kate, that question, I'm not sure if you heard it, I'll ask it again. It was how you ended up being a countryside ranger.
How I ended up being a countryside ranger. So I went to university, well, starting back at school, back where you guys are mostly, I really enjoyed biology and geography. I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. I never really knew what I wanted to do. So I just sort of bumbled along and decided when I went to university, I wanted to study something that I was interested in. So I studied ecology at university with a sort of idea that I wanted to become an ecologist. And then through the process of trying to apply for jobs and things to do with ecology and get experience, I started volunteering with my local ranger service, decided I quite liked it, and sort of fell into rangering from there and got my first ranger job. So people come to the job from all different kinds of backgrounds, so all different kinds of interests and backgrounds. So there's not one clear sort of route into the job, but yeah, that's my story anyway.
That's fantastic. And what could young people watching this just now who might want to be a ranger and work in the countryside, what could they do? Like, where was your local ranger service?
So when I was growing up, my local ranger service would have been, so I grew up in West Lothian, so that would have been up at B Craigs Country Park and Amondale Country Park in West Lothian. But actually, when I was at university, I studied at Stirling University. And at that point, they had a very large ranger service at Stirling University, not at the university, in Stirling itself, or Stirling Council. And they were the ones that I sort of volunteered with and had the most sort of time with. But now I'm linked to most ranger services in Scotland because I'm actually now the vice chair of the Scottish Countryside Ranger Association. So I've got lots and lots of links with lots and lots of people these days.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I think we've actually got some questions from the YouTube comments. We'll get one up now. It's from Rakim. What do you enjoy about your job? Maybe you could give us like the top 3 things you enjoy about your job.
The main thing I enjoy is the variation from day to day. It could be anything from like I might have a nursery group in the morning, but then I might be out in the afternoon fixing a bench, all sorts of things. Or I might be emptying the bins in the morning and getting out, and then I might be on a ranger patrol in the afternoon, and then I might be working with like a scout group in the evening. So the variation of the job is probably the main thing that I enjoy about the job, but I also just enjoy giving people advice and meeting all the different kinds of people that we work with as well. It's definitely keeps it interesting.
That's brilliant. It sounds like a great job. I think we've got another question in. This is from Rachel. Kieran, hello Kieran, is wondering how peat bogs form.
So peat bogs form, the basics very quickly are, so they like, we've got quite a lot of them in West Scotland because it's very wet and relatively humid, sort of temperate sort of climate. And it sort of starts off and it's mainly made out of these mosses called sphagnum mosses. And basically as they rot down, they're like massive sponges as well. So they sponge up all the water. Very, very wet places. You don't really want to go walking across a peat bog too much because you might end up waist deep in the peat because it's quite spongy and wet. It's a bit like a big giant undercooked chocolate cake. And so those plants dying off year after year form the peat bog. And peat bogs, if they're healthy, they grow at about 1 millimetre per year. We've got up to about 10 metres deep peat throughout the wind farm here, and there's a lot of places in Scotland that are quite a bit deeper in places as well. So we had a scientific group come out to do some core samples a few years ago, and they actually had to go back to the university and get more sticks for their peat probe to get the length in. And then that helped them get the length, and it was 7.5 metres. So that peat that they took out of the core at the very bottom of that stick had not seen the light of day in over 7,000 years. So yeah, wow. Really interesting.
That's amazing. So is a peat bog the same? If I really like hill walking, so if I'm going hill walking and I, as I very often do, get lost and end up in a bog, is it always a peat bog or is there different kinds of bogs?
there are different kinds of bogs. So you get the main sort of types are blanket bogs, which sort of blanket the land, as it says. But you also get these ones called raised bogs that are just these random pockets, and they're a bit like a giant pillow of peat. And there's various different examples all over Scotland. And yeah, they grow slightly differently. Most of the time when you're up in the hills, yeah, it's going to be sort of moorland peat sort of habitat there, and it might not be quite as deep as some of the if it's up on the tops of the hills, it might be a bit thinner, but if you go into like the sort of undulating bits of the land, then it might be a bit deeper as well. That's the only way I can describe it.
I've not needed a ranger out to rescue me yet, but at least I know what kind of bog I'm trapped in now. I think we've got another question coming up. Oh, good question. Where else in Scotland can peat bog habitats be found?
Okay, so actually, if you're from the Central Belt, we've got quite a lot in various different areas. So we've got a big one up here at Whiteley, lots and lots of land that's peat bog, but actually you get little pockets, as I said earlier. So you've got things like Flanders Moss, which is near Stirling, for example. That's quite a huge raised bog. That's a really interesting wee place, and they've got like a boardwalk that you can visit and go out on. You get little pockets here and there. So you've got Langlands Moss down in East Kilbride. You've got another place called Wester Ross, which is near Stirling again. And then a lot of like the Highlands are sort of covered in peat of to some description as well. And a really big important place is actually what we call the Flow Country up in the northwest of Scotland, and that's a vast area of peatlands. Really important sort of peatlands up there. We call it the Flow Country. So you've got different reserves and things up there called Forcenard flows and things like that that are sort of managed by the RSPB and things like that to improve the habitats and protect them.
Yeah, I mean, so much of Scotland is just vast sections of countryside, so it makes sense that there's all different kinds of bogs and other peat bogs around as well. I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap up.
Great.
That's a great question. Kate, what's been your greatest achievement as a countryside ranger?
What's been my greatest achievement? I haven't really thought about this. I would just say, well, that's a really tricky one, Patrick.
It's hard talking about yourself sometimes, isn't it? What have you done best?
What's been my greatest achievement as a countryside ranger? Probably just working with really sort of groups and things. Actually, one of my favorite groups that I ever worked with was a group of refugees. It was quite a few years ago now, back in the day before I was at Whiteley, and we worked with a program called Branching Out, and it was to encourage people to get outdoors, people that might be suffering from different mental health issues and things. And refugees have their own different issues that they come with. And actually, it was a really rewarding experience because I had 12 people in that group, 12 refugees, but I also had 6 translators at the same time because not everyone spoke English. So working with all those people, and even the translators got something out of the group. They really enjoyed coming along as well. So we would do things like going for a walk or having a wee campfire and doing marshmallows and things, making our own tea and coffee with Kelly kettles, just getting people out in nature. And I think we all are starting to hear about the benefits of just getting out and about in nature, the benefits of that for your mental health and your as well as your physical health as well, and your well-being. So yeah, that was a really rewarding experience, and I think I achieved quite a lot with trying to keep on top of 6 different translators at the same time. It was certainly interesting.
It feels like I was interviewing you for a job there instead of hearing all about yours, but that sounds amazing. And for all the young people watching, if you like, working outside, working with your hands and working with loads and loads of different kinds of people, this sounds like an ideal job. I'm sure you can find out more about all the stuff that Kate does on the websites she mentioned. But that, I'm afraid, is all we've got time for. Thank you so much to you, Kate, for joining us today and for sharing your knowledge with us. It's been absolutely brilliant talking with you. Thank you for the audience for your brilliant questions and for putting up with the technical issues that we had there as well. So you can also find lots more interesting content, activities, videos and games on the Curious About website at curiousabout.glasgowsciencecentre.org. And all of our live events are being recorded and will be available to play back later on. So if you missed any, make sure you check them out as well. Please let us know what you think of the festival. A link to our survey is coming up on YouTube just now. But until then, thank you for joining us. Goodbye.